small, and you're gonna be like, Miss Yost, why can't I see my art when you export it? So just make sure that it says inches, and then you're gonna hit create. And I'm not gonna lie, the pen tool can be really frustrating, and that's why I want you, if you're really dedicated to this, practicing it. The things that I'm about to reiterate, I did say last class, but it does take some time to remember all of this stuff. So I'm recording this so you can go back and rewatch this. So when you create a new document, this is your workspace. Don't worry about any of this stuff over here. The only thing that really matters is the layers panel right here. So if you want to have multiple layers of things, you can click the little plus and create a new layer, or you can just, delete the layer. But that's the only thing that you really need to pay attention to. If you accidentally close a panel completely, like sometimes people will close this panel, like they'll hit the little X, do not do that. Otherwise, you're going to be like, oh no, where did my pen tool go? I can't find it, Miss Yost. That's usually what happens when we're in class and students are like, I can't find my pen tool. I can't find my other tools. If that happens to you when you're an illustrator, go up to where it says window at the top. Actually, I'm just going to share my entire screen with you so that you can see when I click on menus. Because you need to see what I'm clicking on in order to remember where it's at. So I'm going to share my screen. Share my desktop. Okay, here we go. So here is Illustrator. When you are on Illustrator, gosh, I have to move this panel down for Zoom because it keeps blocking what I'm trying to show you. Okay, so say you're missing your tools. They went away, they disappeared, they're gone because you accidentally clicked out of them and X'd them out. You can always bring back panels by going up to Window and then going to whatever panel you accidentally closed. So that left panel is my tools panel. Unless I decided to name it something else. Toolbar. Basic. So there it is. And I can drag it back to the side so it locks back into place. But if you accidentally click this, it will close the entire tools panel and you're going to get frustrated. So you go to Window, Toolbars, and you can do basic or advanced, whatever you want. I'm going to go to chat. So you don't have this Illustrator on Chromebooks or Windows OS. Oh, the Windows tab. Okay, well then I'm gonna have to try and log back in and see what you see. You have nothing that I have on the top bar. Interesting. Yeah, that's why it's so hard for me to teach this without seeing what you see. Can you share a screenshot of what your screen looks like? Just so I can see, because I could probably help you out then. And you could just put it in the chat maybe. Or you can be really careful and not close out your toolbar. Because if you do, I don't know how to get it back for you. Yeah, that's crazy. You should be able to get it back. Yeah, if one of you could just share a screenshot with me, so I can see what your screen looks like, that would be fabulous. But in the meantime, I'm just going to go back over the main tools really quick. So the tools that you do need to be comfortable with are the selection tool. This allows you to select and move things. Your direct selection tool allows you to click on anchor points and move them individually. And then there's your pen tool. And the pen tool allows you to make a line and design your designs. I didn't talk about the text or the type tool either. So if you're including your name in the design, what you'd want to do is click on this, and don't just click. You need to click and drag and make a text box, and then you can type in what you want. And if you want to change the font size, you would go up to character at the top and change the font size there. But you have to make sure you highlight all of it first, and then you can change the character size and the type of font that you're using as well. And then if you want to increase the tracking, remember the tracking is the spacing between every single letter. That's what this one is. And then if you want to increase the thickness, like kind of distort your text, you can play around with that too. So this is a really great panel for manipulating your text. Okay, so the other area that I want to talk about is, and I talked about this last class, is the fill and the stroke. And this is really important because you'll get really frustrated if you don't remember how these work. So let me just make a shape really quick. So anytime you make a shape or use the pen tool, the fill color is the color that the shape is filled with, and you can double click here to change that. You move this up or down to find the colors that you want, or the hues, and then you move this around to get a different tint or shade of that color, and then you hit OK. Say I want to change the actual outline color of this. That is the stroke, and you can double click on it to change the color and then hit OK. And while this is selected, you can go up to the very top and change the thickness of the stroke. If you accidentally click off of your shape, it won't change it. So you have to make sure that, say you want to manipulate the shape, go to your selection tool and click on it, and then this menu will pop up, and then you'll be able to change that. For our purposes, you're probably going to want to get rid of the fill color for your design. And how you do that is you click on the fill and then click right here where it says none, and that gets rid of it. So with that being said, those are the main tools that you really need to know. Like, they're the basic fundamentals that I use the most for my designs when I was a practicing graphic designer way back in the day. The other tools are really great, but those are the most important ones. So for the pen tool, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you another little demo. I'm going to click on the pen tool. Do not click on the curvature tool. It's frustrating unless you know why you're using it. So just the pen tool. And then I don't want to fill, so I'm going to click the swap. So there's no fill, but I do have a stroke. Again, what you can do is just click on the fill and click none, and then double click on your stroke and get whatever stroke color you want. So my pen tool looks a little bit different than yours because I have a newer version of the software. So my pen tool looks like an X. It's still the same thing. Say you want a perfectly horizontal line, hold down Shift and it makes the perfect vertical 45-degree or horizontal line for you. When you let go of shift, it moves with your pen tool. And every time I click, it makes a new anchor point. And what's great about the anchor points is that if I were to grab the direct selection tool, it would allow me to click on any of these anchor points and move them. But you have to click one time to select the anchor point, and then you click and drag to move that anchor point. If I just clicked on an anchor point, sometimes it won't move it. So I have to click once on it, but it looks like it's working for me, which is a miracle. But that is what this white arrow does for you. Then what I was gonna say is if you want to make curves, curves are really difficult for new designers learning Illustrator, so be patient with yourself. So typically how a curve works is you'll create one anchor point, and then on your second anchor point, you click and don't let go. You drag and then you let go, and that allows you to make that curve. It's easy to be frustrated by this, so if you do make a mistake, don't keep clicking on the anchor points, because I know students do that. They're like, oops, I didn't mean to do that, and they keep clicking on it. If you make a mistake, just hit Command Z and undo, and that's the best way to fix it. So I'm gonna click and drag, and here's my curve. And say you're like, oh, I like that curve, but I don't want to have this line keep going anymore. You can hit escape on your keyboard and it gets rid of that line, so you can start making a new shape. And playing around with the curves, it can be kind of intimidating. So I recommend using this time to just play with it. And if you're like, oh, I really like how this looks, I just want to change how this curve feels, what you can do is you can click and hold on, let me actually click on the shape. So I'm gonna click on this anchor with my direct selection, and then I'm going to grab one of the handles, and that is how you manipulate it after you create the curve. So one more time, say I wanted to fix this curve or change it, I would click on my direct selection tool and then click on that line and grab the handle, the end of the handle, and move it around. And that's how you can manipulate it. You can also grab that anchor point and move it as well, so that you can move it so the curves aren't as sharp, I guess. Let me take a look at the chat. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I do need to plug in my computer. I know you all remember how my computer dies at like 50% sometimes, which is ridiculous. I appreciate the heads up. Cool. So the other thing I was going to mention about Illustrator is when you do create a design, say you make something that is an enclosed shape. So if I do this, and I'm like, oh, I want a straight line. I don't want this curve, similar to what I have right here. If you don't want it to keep curving anymore, the best thing that you can do is click back on this anchor point and watch what happens. I click on it and it gets rid of that other handle. So now I can make a straight line. And then I'm going to make another straight line, and I'm going to go back up to my first anchor point and click on it. And now I have an enclosed shape. And the reason why you need to close your shapes is if you want to fill this shape with color, you have to make sure that you close it completely. And you'll know that it's closed because when I go to make a shape, for example, see what happens when I hover over my first anchor point. I get this little circle by my pen tool, and that means I'm about to close my shape. And the reason why we need to do that is if I don't close it, then it won't completely fill correctly with color. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my fill and then choose a color, and voila, there we go. I was able to fill my shape. So you're like, oh, I want to fill this with color now. Select that shape, go to your fill, and then double click on it and then choose a color and it will fill. If you don't do that, watch what happens. Illustrator tries to figure out, oh, I think she's wanting to close the shape, but then it starts to get really wonky and you're like, oh, I did not mean for it to do that. That's why I design typically without having a fill color at first, because if I do something like this, it just messes everything up and it's like hard for me to wrap my mind around, and it's not a closed shape. And then when you try to export this, it's just really messy. So it's better to start designing without a fill color, just because of that. Let me take a look at the chat. You actually do have the top bar that you have in Illustrator. How did you find that? So the other students know. Did you like scroll up or something? Oh, okay, let me go and look at the screenshot. Oh wait, I'm gonna stop sharing because that will be really helpful. Ooh, I do like what you're designing. Oh yeah, okay, cool. So you're able to just, it is at the top. Did you have to just like move your screen somehow or scroll up to be able to see that? No, it's just there. Okay, cool. Okay, great. I was like, why would they give Illustrator to you all if they didn't provide access to those menu options? So yeah, let me go back to sharing. Okay, so yes, you do have access to the stuff up here at the top. It just looks a little bit different on your menu or your screen than me. That's only true if it's on a Mac because Chromebook and Windows OS don't have that. Well, one of the other students is on their Chromebook and they did see this at the top. They sent me a screenshot. So maybe scroll up a little bit, Jivio, because it should be there. It would be weird if they didn't put this portion there for you. Yeah, because if you accidentally do this and close your toolbar, then I want you to be able to go to the very top. Can you see it when I click window and have the drop down? Like, can you see all of this? Yes, okay, cool. Yeah, so if you accidentally close out of a panel or something, you go to window, and then mine says toolbars. And so if you accidentally close out of that toolbar, just go there and then it'll pop back up for you. Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention, let me just delete all this stuff, is say you're like, oh, Miss Yost, my logo is just like, I don't know, stuff inside of a circle. You don't have to use the pen tool to make a circle. Illustrator already has shapes for you, and that's right here. So the rectangle tool, if you click and hold on it, then this little panel pops open. So once again, I click and hold on the rectangle tool and this little panel with different shapes pops open. So if you're wanting to do a triangle, for example, you have to click on the polygon tool and then just click once in your workspace. And then this little panel or menu pops open and you can click down to 3 sides and it makes a triangle for you. And then if you keep clicking and dragging, it will make more triangles for you. It's only if you click once and don't drag that this menu will pop up open for you, and you can make stuff with more sides. I'm just going to delete that. Let me take a look at the chat. Oh, thank you, Dylan. It's next to the home icon on the Chromebook. Yeah, so for those of you who are not able to see this part, this menu, Dylan said that it's next to the home icon on the Chromebook. So now I know. Thank you. Okay, so this is really helpful if you're wanting to make shapes. Since we're in here, I want to share something that I really love doing in Illustrator that is like a hack that is gonna blow your minds. Okay, so watch closely. I am recording this so you're able to rewatch it later, but this is my favorite part. So I'm just gonna go ahead and grab a fill color for this. And then I am going to, oops, I do not want that. I want a triangle. Okay, so I'm gonna make a few triangles. And there we go. And then I'm going to use the direct selection tool to move them on top of each other. And they have to be touching for this to work. And then I'm gonna grab the rectangle tool and make a little stump there. Okay, so once you layer all of your shapes in the order that you want them, what you have to do is you have to grab your direct selection tool and then you click and drag over all of your shapes so they're all active. It's really important that you do that. And then you go to this tool. It's called the Shape Builder tool, and it is my favorite tool in Illustrator. You click on it, and then you drag through all of your shapes, and then voila, it becomes one big compound shape. How cool is that? I'm hoping that that blew someone's mind. I can't see your faces, but in your version of Illustrator, it does not give the option to close the toolbar. Okay, good. I'm so glad they fixed that. Okay, so how many people, did that blow anyone's mind? Like, when I figured out how to do that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's gonna save me so much time. The other thing that I wanted to show you, let me look at the chat. You found it helpful? Okay, good. I could nerd out about Illustrator all day long. I love it. So the other thing that you could do is sometimes they're like really complex logos that I'm like, wow, that's really creative. How did they do that? And literally all they do is they'll stack a few shapes on top of each other and come on, ellipse tool. There we go. Hold on, let me get these. And then I'm going to move that and then move that and then select all of it. And then I'm going to use my Shape Builder tool to drag through every piece of this. And then it makes this like really cool, complex shape, right? Like, so that's so much easier than using the pen tool. But if you do have a design that is more freeform and organic, you will need to use the pen tool. So this is really handy. It's like one of the best tools in Illustrator. The other thing that I love about it is Once again, if you hold down Shift, you can make a perfect circle, because if I don't hold down Shift, it can get really wonky. So say I have two circles that are overlapping, and I select both of them, and I use my shape builder tool and I click in the middle. What the shape builder tool will do is it also will cut things out for you. So if you overlap shapes and you select them and then click once in the center or where you want to cut that piece out of, and then click off of it. You have to completely click off of it so it's not selected anymore, otherwise it won't work. Then I select the piece that I want to delete. Then voila, I made some moons. Super easy, right? And they're perfect. I didn't have to use my pen tool to create those curves. So those are some hacks that I usually go over in class. Once again, this is being recorded, so you can go back and watch this as many times as you want. But Illustrator is such a great tool. It allows you to do so many things. It just can be really frustrating. So if you're really into this, play with it over break. And please make sure to save it in 2 different formats. You can save Illustrator files to your Google Drive. So if you're like, oh, I really like this, I'm gonna come back to it and work on it later, you have to save it as an Illustrator file. If you don't, and you save this as like a JPEG, you can't go back and edit the JPEG. So here's what I recommend doing. Going to File, Save As, and then make sure you leave the .ai, don't delete it, just delete the name and title it. And then I would recommend saving it to your desktop, or if you have the option to directly save it to Google Drive, do that. And hit save, and then another panel will pop up and you just say, okay. When that's done saving, then you can save your designs. Just make sure that you make them small enough to fit onto your document. Otherwise, it will only save part of it. So when you're like, okay, I want to just save this as a JPEG and turn it in, then you do File, Export. And I know that's really annoying. I will have written instructions for how to save and to export for you, because normally you'd want to do Save As, right? But no, if you want to save it as a JPEG or PDF or whatever, you have to hit Export, and that's really annoying. So Export, and then Export As. Excuse me. And then you're going to go down to where it says Format, and this is really important. Go to JPEG, and then make sure you save it to your desktop, and then hit Export, and then hit OK. And I'm fine with it just staying at CMYK or RGB for now, because when we actually go to export it for the assignment, I will have you export it. Well, I don't care at this point because we're not going to print it out. So it's totally fine if you leave it as is. And it does not have to be web safe colors, because that goes a little bit more in depth than I normally can do over Zoom. But that brings up a good point. I did want to show you really quickly how you can figure out if it's web safe or not. So if you say this is the color that you want to use for your brand and you love it, to double check and make sure that it's safe for web, meaning that if you were to put it on your website, the color would actually show up as this color. You just have to double click on this, and right in this area, you'll notice that a color will pop up with a little exclamation point. That means that it's not safe for web. So if you were to put it on a website, it wouldn't show up as that color. So if I drag around in this area, Huh, it looks like those are, let me get to a crazy, yeah, there we go, to a crazy color. So this pops up, and that means if I made my logo this color and put it on my website, it would not show up as that color. It would show up as a different color. It would still be magenta, but it might be a toned down version. So if you click on it, it will move it to a web safe color for you, which is really helpful. So that is just something that is good to know as a designer, especially if you're wanting to put this stuff onto a portfolio. Like say you're gonna want to go to art school or design school and you want your colors to actually truly reflect what it is you designed, you wanna pay attention to that. Okay. Yep, that's true. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, so you can also click right here, only web colors, and that will only allow you to select colors that are safe for web. Thank you for pointing that out. I know that some of us are like, why, Miss Yost? But this is something that you need to know if you want to go into design. Because you wouldn't want to send this to a client and then have them be like, the color looks different on my website. Those clients wouldn't really be able to tell the difference, but still, there are some people. Okay, so any other questions about Illustrator? I can't go too in depth with you because I need to be able to be there to like help you when stuff goes wrong because it's technology and it'll inevitably go wrong. But those are the very, very basics if you want to use Illustrator to design your logo. The last thing that I'm going to mention is if you want to use Illustrator, one of the best things to do is take a photo of your designs, put it on Illustrator, and then you can trace over it with a pen tool. That's totally an option. You do not have to do it. You could just look at your designs on a piece of paper and then create it based off of what you're looking at. That totally works too. It's up to every individual how they want to do it. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing and then I am just going to go to the calendar and I just want to talk really quickly about what you need to have turned in before we go to break and what we're going to do when we come back from break because some of you might want to start designing your final logos, but I really want to make sure that you know what I want it to look like at the end so that you don't design it and then you're like, oh, I have to go back and resize things. So let me share my calendar. Please make sure you have turned in the self logo ideate. Remember, that's your 30 sketches. This is the assignment that we've been working on this week. And let me go back. And then our next step, so this, our next step is to choose your top 5 designs, which I had you do yesterday and think about the day before, but I really want you to make sure that you get this done before you start designing your logos. And then this is the next part. So the design component, you're going to eventually share with me your completed 5 designs. I want to see what they look like. And then we're going to put them into a brand guide. So let me just go over this really quick. So on the presentation, when we come back, I'm going to go back over this again. And I've shared this with you before. These are what we call tight sketches. And tight sketches are just really clean drawings that basically look the exact same way that you want your final design to look. This is really helpful for those of you who are not able to use any software because your computers are being crazy. If that's the case, I really want you to make your logos very, very clean and organized. when we actually go to use Illustrator, this is what it could look like. Very clean illustration created by a computer. Ideally, this is what we would do in class, but we have to use what we have. So now what we're gonna do is when you choose your top designs, then you're going to start creating them in whatever program you want to use. You can use Illustrator, you can use Photoshop Sketch, Illustrator Draw, or you could just use Canva. And I did talk to you about how to use Canva a couple days ago. If none of those work, just do it by hand. I'm totally fine with that. The reason why I want to bring up the last part of this assignment, like the part 4, is because if you're doing it by hand, you're probably going to want to structure it in the way that the final assignment looks. So the final assignment is our brand guide. And I was going to focus on this when we get back, but I know some of you might just be doing this by hand, and I want to share it with you before we leave. So the brand guide, this is when we present our final designs to our client, and we do it in a professional looking way. The brand guide puts all of your logos together, your color palette. If you decide on typefaces that would go good with your logo, you put it there. But what I'm looking for is, and I'm missing it on this, she did her main logo right here, which I would recommend putting it at the very top, and then her sub logos below it, which are your alternate logos. That's why I had you choose 5. You're gonna have a main logo up top and then your 4 alternate logos down below it. And then you're gonna choose colors that go with your logo. If you don't have colors for your logo, say your logo is just black and white, you don't have to have this. And then when we normally do a brand guide, I have you choose 2 fonts that would go well with your design. You do not have to do this. If you feel like it would go well with the kind of design that you're doing, absolutely add it. And typically what we do is you write the name of your typeface, all of the letters in capitals, all of the letters in lowercase, and then your second typeface, same thing. And this just shows your client, hey, if you were to put all of this together on your website, these are the fonts that I would recommend that you use in any business cards, website, anything like that. What, Aaron?
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, so this is just an additional portion that I'm not going to make required, but if you feel inclined to, you can add it, because that's typically what designers do. And the alternate logos do not have to look similar. Remember, when I showed you my graphic designer who made my logo, why is this being weird? He has my main logo, and then he made these alternate logos that are just like smaller sub logos. You can do something like this. It obviously doesn't have to be exact, but I do want them to feel like they're tied together, right? So they don't have to look similar, no, but I do want them to feel like they fit together as a whole. Gosh, why is my internet being so awful? But at least you can see this, even if you can't see this. Here we go. Yeah. So he did a really good job. Main logo, sub logos, they have the same kind of elements. They use the same kind of text, the same kind of thickness of lines, and that same illustrative feel. So they're not the same, but they do tie in well together. And then let me respond to a message really quick. And then the last part of this is adding some of those inspirational images that you put on your Google document at the beginning of this project. I'd recommend doing it in Canva. If you're not comfortable doing this on whatever program you're using, Canva allows you to arrange this in a way that is clean and looks good. And I do have all of the other instructions here, but eventually this is what the final design, the final thing that you're turning in will look like. So for those of you who are drawing it by hand, that's why I was saying you probably need to keep this in mind, because you're going to want to do your final sketches or your final designs on a piece of paper near the top so that you can add these components to it as well, or at least take a photo of your final designs and then import them into Canva so that you can arrange it like this. Okay, does that make sense? So all I want you to focus on is thinking about making your final designs. Don't worry about any of this yet. When we get back from break, that's when we'll start to put it together, okay? Let me take a look at the chat. You are welcome. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay, so that is all I have. I just really wanted to go over that for those of you who wanted to work on this over break and not give any new work to you. But that is where we're going with this project. So when we get back, we're gonna hit the ground running and start working on finalizing all of that brand guide stuff. So any questions? Okay. Yes, thank you. Have a great break. Yeah. All right. Well, if you don't, go ahead and hop off and have a wonderful break, everyone. Bye. Thank you. Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, you too, Nadia. Happy holidays, Evelyn. Bye, Dylan. See you next year. Bye, Moa. Have a good break. Bye, everyone.